Good morning. Thank you for watching Amir 5858. I am Amir Goodman. I am thankful to all news resources and my entire team. Following are the news which have been reported by American, European, Canadian, Australian, African and Asian channels and also AFP, AP, writer news agencies. Now the news headlines. Cyber attack on Ticketmaster in Canada. Protest in McGill University, Canada. Pat Sajak final farewell to Wheel of Fortune. Hiring is rising in America. Who will be vice president of Donald Trump? Public health after the pandemic. Biden apologized to Ukraine. American peer reconnected to Gaza. Israeli strike again another school. Supreme Court justice and luxury trips. Former White House chief of staff pled not guilty. New fuel economy rules in America. Famous astronaut died in plane crash. Biden and Macron discuss Ukraine. Danish Prime Minister hit by a man. Israel war cabinet could break. Now the news in detail.
I'm Jeff Bennett.
And I'm Amna Nawaz. On the NewsHour tonight, the latest jobs report shows an unexpected surge in hiring. We look at how young people are re-engaging with the workforce.
We take a closer look at Donald Trump's search for a running mate. Who is on the short list?
And a theater company that addresses contemporary issues focuses on public health after the pandemic.
It creates a context where we can talk about not just what just happened over the last 4 years, but how do we ensure that it doesn't happen again?
Like you. Thank you.
I'm Stephanie Tsai with NewsHour West. Here are the latest headlines. President Biden publicly apologized today for the months-long delay in getting U.S. military aid to Ukraine. His comments came during his visit to France, where he also announced a new $225 million security package for Kyiv. The president signed a $95 billion security package in April. The measure was held up in Congress for 6 months. Biden met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Paris today.
I apologize for those weeks of not knowing what's going to happen in terms of funding, because we had trouble getting the bill that we had to pass, had the money in it, from some of our very conservative members who were holding it up.
Later, the president paid tribute to the Army Rangers who stormed the beaches of Normandy as he stood on the very cliffs they scaled 80 years ago. In his remarks, he invoked their sacrifice to call for the defense of democracy in the U.S. and abroad. The U.S. military says it has reconnected a pier meant to deliver aid to Gaza after it broke apart in storms last month. The maritime route was intended as an alternative to delivering aid by land as Israel carries out its military operations in Gaza. The pier took 2 months to build and had only been in operation for about a week when it was damaged. U.S. Central Command says deliveries are expected to resume in the coming days. Meanwhile, in central Gaza, Palestinians mourned outside of a hospital after the latest round of deadly Israeli airstrikes. Health officials say at least 18 people were killed overnight, including 4 children and 1 woman. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has disclosed 2 luxury trips from 2019 that were partially paid for by Republican mega-donor Harlan Crow. Justice Thomas said the trips to Bali, Indonesia, and to California's wine country were inadvertently omitted from a previous disclosure. The Bali trip was part of a ProPublica report last year that led to renewed focus on the court's ethics. 8 of the 9 justices provided new disclosures, including Ketanji Brown Jackson, who received $900,000 for her upcoming memoir and Beyoncé tickets gifted by the singer herself. Former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows has pleaded not guilty to 9 felony charges in Arizona's election subversion case. Michael Roman, who served as Trump's Elections Day operations director, also pleaded not guilty. The pair are alleged to have been part of an effort to submit the names of fake electors from Arizona to Congress following the 2020 election in a bid to keep Trump in office. Joe Biden won Arizona by a narrow margin of 10,000 votes. The Biden administration is raising fuel economy standards for new cars. According to updated rules from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, light-duty vehicles must meet an average of 50.4 miles per gallon by model year 2031. Officials say the rules will save Americans more than $23 billion in fuel costs. The new requirements are well below the levels the administration initially proposed last year. The U.S. labor market remains on strong footing. New data out on Friday showed that the economy added 272,000 jobs last month. That is more than expected. Hourly wages also rose in May, gaining 4.1% from a year ago. Meantime, the unemployment rate ticked up to 4%, a level not seen since early 2022. Economists say the relatively strong report will likely give the U.S. Federal Reserve further reason to hold off on cutting interest rates for now. And Pat Sajak's turn as host of Wheel of Fortune is coming to an end. His final episode airs tonight after 41 years at the helm. The 77-year-old has been a fixture on our TV screens through 7 presidents and the rise of streaming TV. Through it all, Sajak has coolly walked contestants through the hangman-style game, with longtime partner Vanna White turning the letters. He'll be succeeded by TV personality Ryan Seacrest, who makes his debut in September. And a passing of note, retired American astronaut William Anders died in a plane crash today in Washington State. Anders was a member of the Apollo 8 mission, the first human spaceflight to orbit the moon. He took the famous photo Earthrise on that mission, giving us Earthlings a different perspective on our world. According to local media, Anders was piloting a vintage Air Force T-34 Mentor plane when he crashed into the water off the San Juan Islands. Will Anders was 90 years old. Still to come on the NewsHour, David Brooks and Jonathan Capehart weigh in on the week's political headlines. And college commencement speakers offer words of wisdom to the class of 2024.
This is the PBS NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
Today's job report showed an unexpected surge in hiring last month. The leisure and hospitality sector has been growing at a steady clip and added over 42,000 jobs, an encouraging prospect for teenagers who are looking for a job this summer. And teen jobs overall have been making a comeback. After a decades-long decline that began in the early 2000s, Gen Z is reversing the trend. The percentage of 16 to 19-year-olds who had a job or were looking for one hit a high of 38% in May. To discuss the rise in teenage employment, I'm joined now by Alicia Modestino, Associate Professor at Northeastern University in the School of Public Policy and Urban Affairs. Welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So other than a dip in the pandemic, teen employment rates have kind of been increasing.
Former President Donald Trump says he'll choose a running mate in the next few weeks and will likely unveil his pick at a major turning point in the campaign.
I think I'll announce who that person's going to be during the convention. I think that's pretty normal. During the convention, there'll be an interesting period of time.
Our Lisa Desjardins has been covering the Trump campaign and joins us now to talk more about this. So Lisa, based on your reporting, who seems to be under consideration?
Here to help us further break down the vice presidential picks and other political happenings of the week, we turn to the analysis of Brooks and Capehart. That is New York Times columnist David Brooks and Jonathan Capehart, associate editor for the Washington Post. Great to see you both. Let's pick up where Lisa left off, shall we? On those potential vice presidential picks.
Actors, experts, and community members are turning to a classic play to address contemporary trauma and tensions from the pandemic. Jeffrey Brown has this look as part of our new series, Art in Action, exploring the intersection of art and democracy. It's part of our ongoing arts and culture coverage, Canvas.
Yesterday, you said that the water supply was contaminated by impurities in the soil.
And we'll be back shortly with some of the best advice given by politicians, actors, and even members of the NewsHour team to the class of 2024 from commencement addresses around the country.
But first, take a moment to hear from your local PBS station. It's a chance to offer your support, which helps to keep programs like the NewsHour on the air.
For those of you staying with us, in the summer of 2022, historic flooding in eastern Kentucky devastated Appleshop. It's an important cultural hub for the region that's home to a large archive of Appalachian history and culture. Jeffrey Brown first brought us Appleshop's story in 2018. In this encore report, he returns for our arts and culture series, Canvas.
Oh boy.
Despite heightened tensions on many college campuses this year, it's still graduation season, and that means politicians, actors, and even members of the NewsHour team have been sharing advice and encouragement to graduates around the country. Here are some of the life lessons this year's commencement speakers passed on to the class of 2024.
I've never seen this many young people so thrilled to be.
There is much more online, including our weekly digital show, that's PBS News Weekly, that takes a look this week at a big year in global elections as half of the world's population votes in 2024. That's online now on our YouTube page.
And be sure to tune in tonight for a special edition of Washington Week with The Atlantic. Jeffrey Goldberg speaks with New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman about America's rising tensions with China, Russia, and Iran.
And on PBS News Weekend, as temperatures rise around the world, many schools in the U.S. are struggling to keep classrooms cool, putting students' learning and their health at risk. And that is the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Amina Navaz.
And I'm Jeff Bennett. For all of us here at the PBS NewsHour, thanks for spending.
On this Friday night, new details on a Ticketmaster cyber attack. How many Canadians were affected? The info hackers did not get, and the major change to better protect customers. Mayhem at McGill University. The violent confrontations and the cleanup. The border worker strike averted for now. More negotiations are at, and a new deadline to make a deal. Info hackers did not get, and the major change to better protect customers. Mayhem at McGill University. The violent confrontations and the cleanup. The border worker strike averted for now. More negotiations are at, and the new deadline to make a deal. Plus, a record-breaking run and a wheel well spun.
The time is right for me.
Pat Sajak's final farewell to Wheel of Fortune.
Global National with Foreign Answer.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with files obtained by Global News highlighting just some of what was compromised in last month's Ticketmaster hack. The data of around 560 million customers, including the info of Canadians, was stolen. Cyber attacks, especially those involving ransomware, that's where your data is held hostage for a price, are becoming increasingly popular. Last year, organizations paid out more than $1 billion in cyber ransoms, hitting a record high. The largest known payout by a single company is around $40 million. In our top story tonight, Mark Relay looks through some of the files from the Ticketmaster breach and explains what changes are reportedly in the works to protect consumers.
Shiny hunters are a secretive yet ruthless collection of hackers that scour the web looking breaches. Mike Relay, Global News, Toronto.
And 3 months after Canada's financial watchdog FinTrack was hit by a cyber attack, a key reporting tool is still offline. Experts say the outage has created a major blind spot for identifying money laundering and other serious crimes. And while FinTrack says it's found a workaround for most submissions, critics say the intelligence gap is significant. Carolyn Jarvis reports.
It's estimated billions of dollars in dirty money are laundered in Canada every year. Profits from organized crime like car thefts, the opioid crisis, and firearms trafficking. but a key tool for tracking that money provide a precise date for when it will be fully restored. Carolyn Jarvis, Global News, Toronto.
Weeks of peaceful protests boiled over at Montreal's McGill University late yesterday after pro-Palestinian demonstrators barricaded themselves inside the school's main administration building. More than a dozen people were arrested, and the university saying this escalation is troubling. Mike Armstrong reports.
Cleanup crews at McGill University were busy overnight. If you didn't know about the occupation of the administration building and the violent confrontations outside just hours earlier, the only hint of something was the aim to scare people. Meantime, both sides are blaming the other for talks aimed at finding a resolution falling apart. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
The United Nations has added Israel, Hamas, and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad to its so-called list of shame. It's part of a report documenting alleged rights violations against children in armed conflict, set to be presented to the UN Security Council next week. Since October 7th, it's estimated more than 13,000 children have been among the more than 36,000 people killed in Gaza. And today, Palestinian medics say 3 people were killed by an Israeli airstrike on a UN-run school. Just yesterday, another UN school in Gaza was hit, with at least 33 people killed, most women and children. Israel maintains it is targeting precise locations where it says Hamas militants are located.
Place to go. Heather Yurex West, Global News, Calgary.
In the southern and western United States tonight, 31 million people are under excessive heat warnings as a massive heat dome sits over the region.
Definitely do have more extreme heat that usually hits us nowadays. I think there are definitely drastic changes coming.
The heat is reaching as far north as California's Central Valley. Farmers there say the temperature spike has been dramatic, from the high 20s on Monday to now over 40 degrees Celsius. In Phoenix, temperatures have been pushing 45 degrees, and Las Vegas isn't much cooler, breaking a record high of 44 on Thursday. A stark warning tonight for Calgarians after a water main ruptured. The city's asking residents to reduce its water usage even more because it's at risk of running out.
We're asking you today to reduce your water use an additional 25% of what you reduced yesterday, and we're hoping everyone can do just that little bit more.
Some areas of the city remain under a boil water advisory after a major water main broke on Wednesday. The size of the break is unprecedented, so there's no timeline on when repairs will be completed. The cause is still under investigation. Canada's border workers are staying on the job for now. Coming up, the new deadline to make a deal. Border workers now have a few more days to hammer out a deal to avoid a strike. Last-minute talks led to a delay in looming job action for 9,000 employees with the Canada Border Services Agency. Their union now says there won't be a strike until at least Wednesday. David Aiken reports.
The world's longest undefended border is also one of the world's busiest. Every day, $3.5 billion worth of goods crosses the land border between Canada and the U.S. At Canada's ports, thousands of containers arrive every day from foreign markets, while Canada's airports handle hundreds of international flights a day filled with passengers and cargo. And all of that is overseen by 9,000 frontline border officers. Border officers whose union have committed to take what's known as a job action if their contract demands are not met. That job action would most likely consist of slowing all that inbound commercial traffic, causing potential economic harm to force the federal government's hand. At the Windsor-Detroit border, where $400 million worth of goods crosses every day, businesses need that border to operate normally.
For us, it is a lifeline. It is extremely important that the border continues seamlessly.
It was 2021. The job action then was effective enough that an agreement was reached in less than a day. David Aiken, Global News, Ottawa.
The day after D-Day, ahead remembering an Indigenous Canadian soldier captured and killed by the Germans.
Yango.
Been killed by the Germans. After marking the 80th anniversary of D-Day this week, it's important to remember the bloodshed had only just begun for Allied soldiers. And on this day, back in 1944, a company of Canadian troops also fell victim to war atrocities. They became German prisoners of war before being executed by Nazi troops. Heidi Petracek spoke to a grandson of a Mi'kmaq soldier who died among them.
When soldiers poured from the boats on D-Day, those in the North Nova Scotia Highlanders had a specific mission to take over an airfield 18 kilometers away.
We wanted to go there as a Mi'kmaq warrior and make a difference.
Troy Paul's grandfather, Charles Doucette of Membertou First Nation, was among the troops pushing towards the airfield. But on June 7th, just 6 kilometers from their goal, they were intercepted by the Germans.
And they take out all the heavy artillery, and then the rest of the unit comes out from being hidden and starts attacking the Canadians.
The company had to surrender to an infamous regiment made up of Hitler Youth and retainers long past his age. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
The end of an incredible run on television. Pat Sajak's parting words are next.
What an incredible and unforgettable journey we've had. And I've enjoyed every minute of it with you.
That's Wheel of Fortune co-host Vanna White paying an emotional tribute to Pat Sajak as the game show's host of more than 40 years heads into retirement. After more than 8,000 episodes, the 77-year-old's final episode airs tonight.
Thank you for allowing me into your lives. Every time we taped a show, I met 3 new people from all parts of this wonderful country and the world who were kind and considerate, who rooted for each other. In the end, they were the real stars of the show. To my professional other half, dear Vanna, like me, she takes the show very seriously, but not herself. I shudder to think what these 40-plus years might have been like had they brought someone in all full of themselves playing the prima donna role. Thank you all so very much, and goodbye.
Sajak also took the time to thank his coworkers and his family. Ryan Seacrest will join Vanna White this fall as Wheel of Fortune's new host. It has been 3 decades since a Canadian team won the Stanley Cup. Now, the Edmonton Oilers are the team with a chance to break that drought. Game 1 of their series against the Florida Panthers gets underway tomorrow. Now, most Canadians are fiercely loyal to their favorite teams, but as Eric Sorensen reports, the Oilers may get a bandwagon boost in the finals.
The last Canadian team standing makes Edmonton Canada's team, right?
We believe Oilers, Oilers, let's go! Let's go!
That feeling isn't exactly nationwide. Not like the Raptors championship or even the Blue Jays. As the only Canadian teams in pro basketball and Major League Baseball, hockey has always been different. Like Vancouver fans who live and die with their team.
Still our city. We're not gonna riot. We're gonna keep chill.
10 years ago, when Montreal was the only Canadian team to make the playoffs, there was no way Leafs fans would back the Habs.
No, not a chance. Never. No.
Never. That's a long time. And maybe those hard feelings are softening a bit to bring this back home after 30 years. Normally, Edmonton has the support of 9% of Canadian fans, mostly in Alberta. But a new Ipsos poll this week says 57% of Canadians will cheer for the Oilers and only 9% for Florida. Granted, there are pockets of resistance among ardent fans of the other 6 teams, but Ipsos found almost 70% of Canadians somewhat or strongly agree that Edmonton should be considered Canada's team. Now, it's not as if the Leafs were in the finals and the map would look more like this, a hockey country happily united for anybody but Toronto. No, this is Edmonton, a small market Canadian team with the best player in the world who also happens to be Canadian.
It feels good to maybe unite the country a little bit and have something to bring people together.
A Canadian team hasn't won in over 30 years.
That's what Boston Pizza had in mind with this ad campaign, suggesting bitterly divided Canadian fans could come together just this once.
Let's cheer with the fans we've always cheered against.
That won't work for everyone, like this workman at a Calgary hot dog stand.
What's your team? Calgary Flames. Damn dirty Oiler.
And don't expect bars in Montreal to be teeming with Oilers mania.
In Montreal, not that much electricity. People do watch it, but from home.
But Calgary is the heart of anti-Oilers territory, and even here there's some willingness to get on board.
They're fun to watch, so I think I'll be supporting them. You feel Alberta, right?
Calgarians supporting Edmonton. Man, it has been a long time waiting for a Stanley Cup. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
And that's Global National for this Friday night. I'm Farah Nasser. Thank you for watching. Tonight's Your Canada is the Prairie Lily Riverboat in Saskatoon. Meet the Gertrude will be on the anchor desk tomorrow. Until Monday, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Have a great weekend.
Tonight, the record-breaking heat wave threatening millions of Americans. The heat dome in the west driving temperatures to new highs. 111 degrees in Las Vegas, 113 in Phoenix. The new ice immersion bags first responders are using to save lives. We're tracking the danger. Also tonight, President Biden's speech on the cliffs of Normandy, urging Americans to protect democracy. Plus, his meeting with Ukraine's President Zelensky and what he apologized for. Just in, after his New York rape conviction was overturned, the new twist in Harvey Weinstein's Los Angeles case. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, for the first time, disclosing 2 luxury vacations paid for by a GOP megadonor, and what the other justices disclose, including book deals and Beyonce tickets. Hunter Biden tearing up as his daughter takes the stand. What she told the jury about his efforts to get sober before buying the gun at the center of the case. The outrage in Israel, the UN adding it and Hamas to a blacklist of those who harm children in war zones.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening and welcome. In this season.
Tonight, several breaking stories as we come on the air. President Biden's call to action from the cliffs of Normandy to stay true to what America stands for. In the U.S. tonight, the fiery plane crash, the adults and children pulled from the small plane by Good Samaritans. Also, the flame scene shooting from a passenger jet, the emergency landing, and bracing for severe storms tonight and tomorrow. First tonight, President Biden on the world stage with the lessons from the heroes of D-Day. The president on the urgent need to defend democracy and freedom, and America's alliances, he argued, are more important than ever, saying democracy begins with each of us. Harry Bruce traveling with the president. The news here at home tonight, that fiery plane crash in a front yard, 2 adults and 2 children pulled from the wreckage by Good Samaritans. The pilot had been desperately looking for a place to land. Also, the emergency landing after flames were seen shooting out from a passenger jet moments after taking off. We are also watching the threat of severe storms tonight and tomorrow, the potential for damaging winds, and we're tracking the dangerous heat building across this country so early on in the season. The Hunter Biden trial tonight, Hunter Biden fighting back tears today, growing emotional as his own daughter testified on the stand. Will Hunter Biden testify next? Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas officially acknowledging trips paid for by a Republican megadonor, including a vacation to Bali. The race for president, and tonight Donald Trump arguing sometimes revenge can be justified. The images tonight, the theft on a front porch, grabbing a package just put down by a delivery driver. That driver is still standing right there, where this played out and what the thief escaped with. And one final spin for Pat Sajak. Tonight, Vanna White here at her emotional goodbye, and what Pat Sajak once said about why Wheel of Fortune has connected so many.
From ABC News World Headquarters.
Freeland answering reporters' questions today about that question that keeps hanging over this government, of course, echoing Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc, what he said last week. But where does all of this leave Canadians' faith in our democracy? The top secret committee looking at foreign meddling didn't name names, but should voters know before they have to cast a ballot in the next federal election? Let's bring back the front bench. Sabrina Grover, Melanie Banerjee, Bhutan Singh, and Rachel Aiello. Sabrina, first thing for you here is that obviously this government is trying to create this balance, or strike this balance between as much information as they can give, but also not leave voters in the dark. Where does this leave Canadians, though?
I mean, I think the number one thing to understand about where the government is at right now is that they are in a tough position, right? Because intelligence and information are not evidence. And so it's a tough balance to strike between, what is
contained in these intelligence reports, which are led by a body that the Liberals started to investigate this in 2018, and where the public can come in on that. And I think there's still quite a bit of time to the next election, but that there's been a lot of things, checks and balances that the federal government has put in place in advance of that to start to make sure that people have trust in the democratic institutions. And I think the next step is to make sure that we depoliticize the conversation and move to party level and ensure that the parties are equipped with the right steps, with the right tools to be able to fight this at that level. Because, as much as we can do at the federal level to prevent, national interference, where this interference is going to occur is at the ground level. And I think, the question that I would ask to conservatives who will continue to politicize this is why their leader, why Pierre hasn't received the clearance to get the information himself and start working with his party to make sure that the controls are in place so this doesn't happen again.
Yeah, Melanie, that question has dogged Paul. But also, it's fair criticism for the leader of the Bloc Quebec, well, François Blanchet, who also doesn't have that clearance because he still wants to continue to tee off on this one. And to Sabrina's point, intelligence is not evidence, but the government is continually being under pressure to at least give more information because otherwise it feels like things are just left hanging.
So intelligence may not be evidence, but this intelligence has been reviewed by NSICOP, which is a terrible acronym, but for folks at home, NSICOP is a committee that is made up of some of the most trusted parliamentarians that we have today. They are lawyers, they are former servicemen and women, veterans, and they're people like retired Colonel Alex Roth, who is a conservative MP who sits on NSICOP. This is a man who spent 27 days outside the wire in Afghanistan. He knows what a national security threat is and is not, and who a national security threat is. I think he knows that far better than Dominic LeBlanc in this particular case. And so when the members of this committee review...
Were you in the process of picking a vice president? You're getting close.
Well, yeah, but I think I'll announce who that person is going to be during the convention.
We are now weeks out from Donald Trump's big reveal. All of these Republicans reportedly in contention to be vice president. The former president now tops President Biden in 3 key battleground states, Arizona, Florida, and Nevada. In new Fox polling conducted after his guilty verdict in New York, Biden won 2 of those states, Arizona and Nevada, back in 2020. Let's bring in South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, who is among those on Trump's rumored short list. Senator, it's great to have you on the show. I know that you are launching this outreach effort to voters, minority voters, but you've got to be bolstered and buoyed by the fact that so many young Black and Hispanic voters are already moving toward former President Trump.
Well, Trace, without any question, Trump is putting together a new coalition of working class voters. They are multiracial working class voters. It doesn't matter whether you're Black or white, Hispanic, Asian, or Native American. The one thing you must have is the opportunity to succeed financially. And under President Trump, we have the lowest unemployment rates for African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, a 70-year low for women, a 50-year low for the majority population. President Trump doesn't care whether you're a union worker or non-union worker. If you work in America, he wants to make sure the future is very, very bright. The alternative, of course, is Joe Biden. Joe Biden has devastated, decimated our economy and the hopes of working class Americans across the board. It is time for 4 more years of Donald Trump, 4 more years of low inflation, low unemployment, and high enthusiasm. It's good news for the working class.
But you can see, Senator, you can see the left is starting to see this. They're starting to see the movement of minority voters because they're starting to go after, they're going after you, they're going after other Black Republicans. Justice correspondent for The Nation, Elie Mystal, was on MSNBC saying Black Republicans exist because they are grifters. Listen to him.
That's why Tim Scott exists. That's why Byron Donald exists. That's why Candace Owens exists. Because the grift is good. There's a lot of money in telling white folks what they need to hear.
What do you say about that, Senator?
Listen, Trace, hear me clearly. They are shaking in their boots. What you hear is fear. It's palpable. Why? Because without the Black vote, there is no Democrat Party. President Trump is not playing racial politics, but he is aware that America builds a better future together. He is aware that making sure that all Americans have a chance to live their version of the American dream, it's good for our country. So absolutely, the left, they're losing their minds because they're losing their voters. It's good news for our future, and it's great news for our now. We must win because, listen, Trace, September and October, the Democrats are going to pull out all stops. They are going to do things including lying and cheating without any question. The coalition will stand the test of time because we have a record to run on. It's not promises of the future, Trace. It's the fact that we brought more money to Black colleges than any other president. It's the fact that we cut taxes for a single parent by 70%. It's good news. We have a record to run on, and it's time that we did that.
You say the Democrats are running a little bit scared, and I find this fascinating. We talked about the battleground states and how the former president is doing well in places like Arizona and Nevada, places that Biden won back in 2020. But it's interesting because Virginia is not considered a battleground state, and yet you look at the polls, Joe Biden won this by 10 points back in 2020, and now, according to the Fox News polling, it is deadlocked at 48-48. That's a big sign. Your thoughts?
Yes. Significant sign. We're seeing the same sign in all the states, all the battleground states. We're seeing the same kind of movement towards the Republican Party. President Trump is making sure that the American people know that he's willing to take the bullet for them, so to speak. He said very clearly, and one of the most patriotic things I've heard, Trace, is when the president said, "I'd rather it be me than you." That's the kind of leadership we can get behind. He was talking about, of course, the 2-tiered justice system where Joe Biden has weaponized and targeted his political opponent by weaponizing the justice system. We need a president who's willing to lay down on behalf of the American people, and Donald Trump is that person.
On my show, Fox News at Night, Senator, we ran a poll. We had the VP candidates up there, the VP favorites up there, and I said that you were the natural pick and it was going to be you. Am I wrong?
Well, listen, I don't know that it's about the who, it's about the what. There's no question that I am so excited to live in a country where my story is possible. A kid growing up in poverty in the deep South with a single mom working 16-hour days. For America to continue to evolve, where I'm even in consideration as a blessing. But listen, and listen to me clearly. The greatest threat to the continuation of the American story is Joe Biden. He is the greatest threat to American democracy. We must fire Joe Biden and hire Donald Trump. Poor kids today need to believe that all things are possible. And unfortunately today, we're seeing violence in the streets. We are seeing 10 million illegal immigrants cross our borders. We're seeing political opponents targeted. It's disgusting to see what's happened under Joe Biden.
Well, Senator Scott, I'm sticking with my pick. I think I'm right, and we will find out here in the next month or so. It's great to have you on the show. As always, best of luck. Thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling...
Especially when it comes to gas guzzlers like SUVs and pickups. The push to get more electric vehicles on the road comes as a new AAA survey finds 63% of consumers are unlikely to buy an EV for their next car. CBS's Ben Tracy shows us that while drivers may be pumping the brakes on electrics, hybrid sales are in the fast lane.
At this Ford F-150 plant in Dearborn, Michigan,
every 53 seconds, we have a truck come off this assembly line.
production manager Courtney Reeves says 1 out of every 7 trucks being made on the day we visited was a hybrid.
A year ago, it was 1 out of 10.
1 out of 10?
Yes.
So 30% increase.
Correct. So the consumer is really demanding this product.
Hybrids run on both battery power and gasoline. Sales surged 53% in 2023 to a record high. Hybrids now make up 9% of new car sales compared to about 7% for electric vehicles.
Featuring Hybrid Max powertrain.
They're popular with consumers who want to save on fuel costs but may be reluctant to buy an EV because of price or concerns about charging infrastructure.
There's really no compromise for a hybrid customer.
Andrew Frick is president of Ford Blue. The company just set a new record for monthly hybrid sales and plans to quadruple production in the next 5 years.
We think having a balanced approach of gas, hybrid, and electric vehicles is the right way to go. Is it fair to say you're basically going to make whatever car people are willing to buy? We want to cater to our customers.
You want to jump in the back?
The Biden administration's regulations are pushing automakers to rapidly electrify their vehicles. Because in the U.S., transportation is the top source of planet-warming emissions. Over its lifetime, an EV produces 50% less CO2 than a gas-powered vehicle. A hybrid cuts it by 25%.
EV sales are still growing. They're just growing much slower than they had been a year ago or 2 years ago.
Eric Tingwall with Motor Trend thinks for mainstream buyers, hybrids may be the bridge to the electric future.
The near-term future is hybrid, plug-in hybrid, electric, and some gas vehicles as well.
Ben Tracy, CBS News, Detroit.
Morris, France 24 correspondent based in Madrid, bringing you news, reports and analysis on Spain and Portugal. So join me here on France 24.
Sarah Morris, one of the 200 France 24 correspondents around the world.
The Israeli military strikes a second UN-run school in Gaza in as many days, saying there was a Hamas position there, and meanwhile reacts angrily to being included on a UN list of nations that fail to protect children in war. French President Emmanuel Macron hits out at what he calls pacifists and capitulators, calling for more to be done to support Ukraine in its war against Russia, as he hosts President Zelensky in Paris a day after D-Day celebrations. Meanwhile, President Biden hails the actions of US forces on D-Day 80 years ago at a speech from Omaha Beach, as he apologizes to Ukraine for the delay in sending US aid he said was held up by Republicans in Congress. Welcome to the France 24 newsroom. I'm Alexander Orcott. Now, Israel says it is disgusted at being included in an annual UN report that lists countries that fail to protect children in war. The Israeli Prime Minister described the IDF as the most moral military in the world, saying the inclusion is a flat earth decision, though it does come as 2 UN-run schools were hit by airstrikes, killing dozens of people. Jenny Shin has more.
The mourning of loved ones is a daily scene.
In Yemen, the Iran-aligned Houthi rebels are continuing their strikes on regional shipping in solidarity with the Palestinians in Gaza, as the group faces increasing financial pressure along with the airstrikes from a US-led coalition that started to detain the UN workers. 11 have been abducted. They include staff from the Human Rights Agency as well as from the World Food Programme.
Without explanation, Yemen's Houthis have been targeting aid workers. The spokesperson for the UN confirmed on Friday that during the last 3 days, the group have detained 11 United Nations personnel working in Yemen.
We're very concerned about these developments, and we're actively seeking clarification from the Houthi de facto authorities regarding the circumstance.
Next, the French president is calling on Western powers to demonstrate D-Day spirit in Ukraine the day after hosting tributes that mark the 80th anniversary of the Allied assault that led to the defeat of Nazism. Emmanuel Macron has been perhaps the most vocal supporter of Kiev among EU nations, and as he hosted President Volodymyr Zelensky at the Elysee Palace, he hit out at pacifists and capitulators, as he called them, including the far-right opposition at home.
At France's presidential palace, Emmanuel and Brigitte Macron warmly welcomed their guests. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky bring Ukraine a step closer to the end of the war.
Now, the US president is meanwhile apologizing to the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, for delays in sending military support. He said this was caused by Republicans in Congress. He too met the Ukrainian leader on the day after the D-Day commemorations, also giving a speech from an Omaha Beach clifftop that was scaled by US Rangers 80 years ago.
A symbolic speech in a symbolic location. US President Joe Biden paid tribute at Pointe along the Normandy coast, where American Rangers scaled steep 30-meter cliffs to secure positions against the Germans 80 years on in new aid for Kyiv.
A brief look to another American hero, the sad news that 90-year-old Apollo 8 astronaut William Anders has died in a plane crash when the light aircraft he was piloting alone plummeted into the waters of the San Juan Islands in Washington state this Friday. He was one of 3 men on the first human spaceflight to leave Earth's gravity. He reached the moon, orbited it 10 times, and most importantly, took the iconic Earthrise photo, viewed as one of the most influential ever for making us rethink the environment and global conflicts. Back now to Normandy and a major political own goal for the British Prime Minister, who has been lambasted from all directions for leaving the D-Day celebrations early. Trailing in the polls already by more than 20 points ahead of the snap general election he's called for the 4th of July, Rishi Sunak was forced to apologise for making a mistake, he said, and not taking part in the international commemoration. It's given ammunition to opposition candidates as the leaders and deputy leaders of all top 7 UK parties took part in a live debate on Friday evening local time. Penny Mordaunt, representing Sunak's Conservative Party, admitted it was wrong to leave D-Day early, but highlighted the fact that he had apologised, others though wasting no time sticking the knife in.
Say that it's a mistake. If his instinct was the same as the British people, he would never have contemplated for a moment not being there for the big international ceremony.
Let's
And it shows how disconnected he is with the people of this country.
Let's be clear about what happened yesterday. It was not only politically shameful, but I think many of us feel personally quite insulted.
And the 2024 Olympic Games just around the corner, hosted here in Paris for the first time in a century, is a showcase for the so-called new Olympic model, requiring as little construction of new infrastructure as possible to reduce the expense of hosting. Now, over 75% of the venues for this year's Games are already existing stadiums or other structures, yet work crews are currently everywhere around the capital, making last-minute improvements.
Just a month and a half left to go before the Paris Olympics this summer, and preparations are still underway. Bridges, major landmarks, it seems like every inch of Paris is undergoing a major facelift, traffic away from building sites and cornering off large parts of the capital, where 10 to 15,000 people are expected this summer.
Finally, for a look at the latest from Roland Garros, the Spanish third seed, Carlos Alcaraz, fought back from behind twice to defeat the incoming world number 1, Yannick Sinner of Italy. The grouping semi-final ended after 5 sets, 2-6, 6-3, 3-6, 6-4, 6-3. 21-year-old Alcaraz goes up against 27-year-old German Alexander Zverev in the final. What's becoming a growing rivalry between these younger players as the sport's older guard slowly age out of competition. Zverev beat Casper Ruud to book his place in the final. Now stay tuned to us here on France 24. There's more world news coming up.
Region and the world. Happy 25th anniversary.
This is Asia Now.
It's 11 a.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 8:30 in New Delhi and 10 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Paul Singh. At this hour, United Nations adds Israel to the list of militaries committing violations against children. Israel's ambassador to the UN says he is, quote, disgusted by the shameful decision. Joe Biden apologizing to his counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky for the delay in military aid to Ukraine as both presidents met on the sidelines of D-Day commemorations. The US leader also pledging fresh security assistance of more than $220 million to Kyiv. India's Narendra Modi says the president has invited him to form the nation's next government. Parties key to Mr. Modi's alliance earlier formally elected him as their leader, paving the way for his swearing in this Sunday. The United Nations has added Israel to a list of states committing violations against children. Israel's UN envoy, who called the decision shameful, had posted the notice on social media.
I am utterly shocked and disgusted by this shameful decision of the Secretary General. This immoral decision will only aid the terrorists.
Had been hiding in the compound. Tel Aviv is accusing Hamas and Islamic Jihad fighters of deliberately using UN facilities as operational bases. US President Joe Biden has expressed regrets to his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky for the delay in approving the latest aid package to Kyiv. He blamed some of his conservative colleagues in the Congress for the holdup. Mr. Biden says Washington is, quote, not going to walk away from supporting Ukraine to fend off the Russian invasion. The two leaders met for talks in the French capital as D-Day memorial events take place in the country.
On Friday morning local time, Joe Biden held talks here in Paris at an upscale hotel with his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky. The US leader confirmed another $225 million in aid for Ukraine, and he took the chance to apologise to the Ukrainian president for the months of French fighter jets will be provided to the Ukrainian Air Force, and combat pilots will be trained by French service personnel. Ross Cullen, CNA, Paris.
India's Narendra Modi says President Draupadi Murmu has invited him to head the new coalition government and that he has accepted. The 73-year-old is due to be sworn in tomorrow for a historic third consecutive term. Members of Mr. Modi's BJP and its allies earlier in the day voted unanimously for him to become leader of the National Democratic Alliance at the group's first meeting since Tuesday's vote count. This marks the first time in 10 years that the BJP has needed the support of regional parties to form the government. Mr. Modi mocked the opposition Congress party in a speech last night for winning fewer than 100 seats and accused it of falsely claiming
the next couple of weeks because Mr. Modi will still have to prove his majority in the floor of the parliament.
Ahead on Asia Now, the major protests of 2019 in Hong Kong have had an undeniable impact on the city of today. We take a look back at how the events from 5 years ago have shaped today and the future.
Wondering what that is?
At least 100 people were killed and dozens were injured after the paramilitary rapid support forces attacked a village in Gezira province in Sudan on Wednesday. According to officials, the Darfur governor posted on X that women, children and the elderly were among the victims in the RSF attacks on Wad al-Noura village in Gezira. A grassroots group set up to protect residents in Wad Madani said late Wednesday on social media that the paramilitary forces would use heavy artillery to besiege and attack the village. The United Nations humanitarian chief Martin Griffiths has weighed on the current global crisis threatening peace, linking it to leaders who have different priorities instead of addressing current issues affecting their people.
Look at Sudan, where two warring generals at that time, working together in a transitional process towards civilian rule, decided from one day to the next to take their country to war and to destroy the livelihoods of so many of their people. They didn't negotiate with each other, they didn't use dialogue. They simply decided that the gun was more effective than dialogue.
Griffiths further said the current global crisis was as a result of leaders failing to incorporate negotiations.
So we have lost our passion for peace, and the absence in this divided geopolitical world for political diplomacy to be the central part of how we end wars is something which I deeply regret.
He also pointed out that donors, largely countries, but also some foundations, have cut funding because of expenses like the increasing cost of living and rising energy prices.
5 years to be ready for war. That is what Germany's defense minister told lawmakers on Wednesday. Boris Pistorius believes his country will need to fight. This comes after he called for a review of the military late last year. We must be ready for war by 2029. We must provide deterrent to prevent the worst from happening. 3 issues are central to this: personnel, material, and finances. In an emergency, we need young men and women who can defend this country. Shortly after the conflict in Ukraine flared up, Chancellor Olaf Scholz set in motion a big increase in military spending.
A rare pink diamond, originally from South Africa, is expected to fetch around $10 million when it is auctioned in New York next week on Tuesday. The stone is being sold by Christie's house in New York, and they believe it's worth a sky-high price tag.
It's an old South African diamond, and the source of color is the pressure in the stone. That's what gives pink diamonds their color. The more pressure the stone has, the darker it gets. So this stone has a lot of pressure, which is even more special because it shows how well the cutter had to fashion the stone without damaging it in any way due to the stone's pressure. It was cut at a time when there was not all the technology you have today, computers, machine cutting. This was cut by hand, and that also makes it so much more special.
This diamond is on display to the public during Christie's Luxury Week at Christie's Rockefeller Center in New York City from 7th to 10th June.
The mines are not producing colored diamonds in these sizes anymore. You know, the production is done, so diamonds as you see them, especially colored diamonds, are going to get more and more scarce, more and more rare, and more expensive.
Last month, auction house Phillips sold an exceptional fancy vivid pink diamond ring for just under $12.25 million.
I have never gone to confession before.
Today's the day.
Oh gosh, there's no reason to be nervous. We are queens.
The Art of, Tuesday 9:30 on ABC and ABC iView.
Today, the federal opposition confirms it will dump Australia's 2030 emissions target if elected. Emergency services brace for potential major flooding in Sydney's northwest after hundreds of people were evacuated.
Our dams are full, our waterways are full, our grounds are saturated. So the impact of the rain that we're having at any given time is having a much more profound effect.
A search called off after a surfer goes missing in southwest WA. Tributes flow after the tragic death of astronaut William Anders, the man behind one of the most famous photos taken in outer space. And all the thrills and spills at the Think Desert Race in the NT, Australia's most extreme off-road contest. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Ruby Cornish. The federal opposition has confirmed it will dump Australia's 2030 climate target if it's elected. The coalition argues the target, which would cut emissions by 43% by the end of the decade, is unachievable. Political reporter Tom Lowry joins us now for more. Hi Tom, what's the coalition's case for dropping the target?
Yeah, good afternoon, Ruby. The coalition is arguing that the 2030 target simply cannot be met. 5% target can be met and say Australia should not be abandoning it. And they say pulling out of Paris would make Australia an international laughingstock.
Tom Lowry at Parliament House, thank you. The New South Wales SES is responding to major flooding along the Hawkesbury River, which forced residents to evacuate their homes. The SES instructed residents of Sackville North, Pitttown Bottoms, Lower Portland and Cumberland Reach to leave overnight due to rising floodwaters. Despite the rain easing in some areas, the Warragamba Dam is saturated and continues to spill over. It's expected to slow down in a few days' time. The Hawkesbury River at Richmond is currently at moderate levels, but isn't expected to rise further. In the past day, crews have responded to almost 300 calls for help and carried out more than a dozen flood rescues. The New South Wales SES Acting Commissioner has warned there are still emergency warnings in place for residents across the Hawkesbury Nepean region.
Has been contracting, and today most of New South Wales you will see only limited amounts of rainfall, but that does not mean that the risk is not there, because what we are going to see now is riverine flooding. We must be prepared for many days of isolation.
Rough conditions are hampering the search for a man who went missing at a popular beach in Western Australia's southwest yesterday while surfing. Police and emergency services were on the scene since early this morning, working together with jet skis and local marine rescue to locate the missing surfer. Reporter Ethan French is on the scene in Prevelly. Hi Ethan, what can you tell us about the search efforts so far?
Hi Ruby. Well, at this point in time, as you mentioned, emergency services as well as local marine rescue were on scene quite early this morning searching for the missing surfer who was reported missing firstly yesterday at about 4:35 p.m. after he was surfing here at Surfers Point in Prevelly in the southwest of Western Australia. At this current point in time, the search has been suspended. A local man here from the area, and he's a regular to this beach in his mid-40s.
Okay, Ethan French in Prevelly in Western Australia, thank you for that update. Sydney detectives have extradited a man from Victoria over his alleged role in the kidnapping and sexual assault of a woman earlier this year. Reporter Leah Harris has more from outside the court in Parramatta.
29-year-old Yan Yu Mu faced court a short time ago accused of kidnapping and sexually assaulting a woman before allegedly using images of the attack to extort $300,000 from her until his next court appearance in August, while detectives continue to search for anyone else who may have been involved.
Leah Harris reporting there. The Queensland Government has announced it'll cut the cost of car registrations in Queensland by 20% in this week's state budget. Reporter Lawrence Jeffcoat has more from Brisbane.
Well, the Premier made the announcement a little earlier here at this football field in Holland Park in Brisbane South. He's announced 20% will be slashed off car registration fees for all Queenslanders. Will be extended if he's re-elected later this year.
Lawrence Jeffcoat there. A 3.5 magnitude earthquake has shaken Port Hedland in WA's Pilbara region overnight. It struck about 30 kilometres southeast of the town. There's been no damage to the area. Geoscience Australia says it's received up to 90 reports from residents in the region. Further quake parameters are still being confirmed as seismic data continues to be processed. A new report by the Australia Institute has found that women and low-income earners are being left behind by superannuation tax concessions that favour higher-income earners. The research also found tax concessions are set to cost the federal government more than the age pension within a decade.
Deborah Moxon was a nurse before a career change to buying and selling cafes.
You want a snack? Yep, quick.
At age 60, she's found herself without enough on her next adventure. Coca-Cola Connor, ABC News.
Hunter Biden's criminal trial on gun charges in the United States has been adjourned. His lawyers still haven't decided whether to put him on the stand. The defence called his daughter Naomi to give evidence.
Naomi Biden arrives at a Delaware court to testify for her father. Hunter Biden, the president's son, is charged with lying when he said he wasn't addicted to drugs when buying a gun in October 2018. Naomi Biden told the court that when she saw her father that month, he seemed good, and I was hopeful. In cross-examination, the president's granddaughter seemed rattled when shown texts she and her father exchanged, suggesting he was erratic at the time. I really miss you. I just want to hang out with you. I'm sorry I've been so unreachable. It's not fair to you. The defence then made a last-minute decision not to call Joe Biden's brother Jimmy and said likely learn his fate, in this case at least, as soon as next week. Barbara Miller, ABC News, Washington.
Israel's Prime Minister has lashed out at reports the United Nations will add the Israeli army to a list of countries and entities that have committed violations against children. The list is believed to have been included in a report on children and armed conflict due to be submitted to the UN Security Council later this month. Other past offenders include the Afghan Taliban and the Islamic State group. William Anders, who was part of the Apollo 8 mission, has died in a solo plane crash in the US. He's best known for capturing one of the most famous images ever taken from space. The Apollo 8 astronaut died after the small vintage plane he was piloting plummeted into waters off the US northwest coast. He was 90 years old. In 2022, the University of Melbourne and a US biotech company announced a plan to bring the Tasmanian tiger back from extinction. Now, 2 years into the project, the university has collaborated with artists in creating an exhibition that poses a pertinent ethical question. Should we be doing this?
What do a university professor, a thylacine and a Tasmanian jeweller have in common? They're all part of a project to bring the Tasmanian tiger back to life. They just need to turn this into this.
The really big part of the project is taking that Dunnart cell, that fat-tailed Dunnart, and putting all of the edits into it to really re-engineer the file, rewilding animals, putting animals back into the landscape.
Fearless competitors will be testing their limits across the long weekend in the Red Centre in what's widely considered Australia's most extreme off-road race. This year, 465 riders and drivers will take on the gruelling 226-kilometre track from Alice Springs to the remote community of Apachula and back. Charmaine Allison reports from the Alice Springs end of the track.
Well, it's only the prologue, but already this year's Pink Desert Race is shaping up to be one of the roughest and toughest we've ever seen. Now, the prologue will see more than 460 competitors on cars and bikes tear their way around an 8.3-kilometre track to determine their starting positions for day one of the race tomorrow. Now, the car section of the prologue has already wrapped up today, and in an unexpected upset, two of the favourites for the four-wheel section suffered devastating crashes on the track. The first was West Australian driver Travis Robinson. He came third last year in the Pink Desert Race car section, and he has been a favourite to win, but now he'll be seated to a lower position in the grid. The second was New South Welshman Aaron James. He was also a favourite and will also be seated further down. But it did open up the competition for Travis Robinson's older brother, Bo Robinson, to roar ahead to first place. He's hoping for a clear run tomorrow when he races through the remote Aboriginal community of Apachula. But as everyone knows, the prologue is just a taste, possibly, of what is to come. And if it's half as rough and slippery as today's prologue track, there's certainly going to be a lot of angst and nerves in the air about that. But the prologue is far from finished. The bike section is currently underway.
In Darwin with a top of 30 degrees. That's the latest from ABC News for now. I'm Ruby Cornish. Stay with us.
In this brand spanking new season of Spicks and Specks.
This news is funded by viewers like you. Please support our work at democracynow.org/give. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Israel struck another UN school in Gaza where displaced Palestinians had sought shelter. Al Jazeera reports several people were killed in today's attack on the UNRWA school in the Shakti refugee camp west of Gaza City. This comes a day after an Israeli strike on a UN school in the Nuseirat refugee camp killed at least 40 Palestinians. Video footage has confirmed U.S. munitions were used in Thursday's strike. The New York Times reports remnants of the Boeing-made GBU-39 bomb were uncovered. Al Jazeera also published photographs of a missile fragment made by Honeywell. The UN school had been turned into a shelter for displaced Palestinians. At least 14 children were reportedly killed in Thursday's attack. A number of other children were injured, including Imad al-Makadme, who spoke to a reporter as he lay on the floor of Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in Deir al-Balah.
Why did they bomb us? Why? I want to know why. Why? We are all children in the school. There are no armed people. I don't know why they bombed it. Where should we go? Where? Where should we go? Here or there?
Israel claims Thursday's strike on the UN school targeted Hamas militants, but Israel's presented no evidence to back up the claim. In other news, the UN's warning of a possible cholera outbreak in Gaza this summer due to a severe lack of clean water. In Washington, D.C., congressional leaders have confirmed Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will address a joint session of Congress July 24th. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, along with Senate Republican Leader Mitch McConnell and House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries joined together to invite Netanyahu. In a letter they wrote, quote, "We invite you to share the Israeli government's vision for defending democracy, combating terror, and establishing a just and lasting peace in the region," unquote. The invitation comes just weeks after the head prosecutor at the International Criminal Court, Karim Khan, announced he's seeking an arrest warrant for Netanyahu for committing war crimes. A number of lawmakers have vowed to boycott the speech, including Independent Senator Bernie Sanders. In related news, CNN is reporting the CIA has circulated a new assessment that concludes Netanyahu will likely defy pressure from the Biden administration to end the war on Gaza and set a post-war plan. This comes as the Israeli military has announced it signed a $3 billion deal with the United States to buy 25 F-35 stealth fighter jets built by Lockheed Martin. Israeli officials say the warplanes will be financed by U.S. military aid to Israel. This comes despite growing calls for the U.S. to cut off arms sales to Israel. On Thursday, the NAACP called on President Biden to draw a red line and halt arms shipments to Israel, citing the mounting death toll in Gaza, where over 36,700 Palestinians have been killed in the past 8 months. This is NAACP CEO Derek Johnson.
We witnessed individuals in Gaza who are civilians being attacked. And they went to what was supposed to be the safe zones. These are things that are avoidable. The United States must take a moral stand to protect civilian, innocent children and lives.
In the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces killed 3 Palestinians and wounded at least 13 in a raid on the city of Jenin on Thursday. The group Defense for Children International reports the dead included a 16-year-old named Issa Nafez Musa Jalad, who sustained gunshot wounds. Children International reports the dead included a 16-year-old named Issa Nafez Musa Jalad, who sustained gunshot wounds to his leg, back, and back of the head. The Biden administration's announced it'll send another $225 million in military aid to Ukraine, including munitions that could be used to strike targets inside Russia. Earlier today, President Biden met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky issued by the House January 6 committee. In Sudan, over 100 people, including dozens of children, were killed after Rapid Support Forces fighters stormed a village in the Al Jazeera state Wednesday, indiscriminately firing at civilians. Survivors of the massacre described the carnage, saying over 40 armed RSF vehicles raided the village of Wad al-Nur, unleashing heavy weaponry. The RSF has claimed it was targeting the Sudanese army, but village residents say there's no military presence in the region. The UN's condemned the attack, while the International Organization for Migration warns the number of displaced people over the intensifying conflict in Sudan could soon reach 10 million. This comes as the European Union is expected to impose sanctions on 6 members of the Sudanese military and the RSF over accusations of war crimes, as both sides fight for control of Sudan's Darfur region. In South Korea, thousands of workers at Samsung Electronics went on strike today for the first time in the company's history. Some 28,000 union members have joined the one-day action. That's nearly a quarter of Samsung's entire workforce in South Korea. They're demanding salary increases and bonuses as Samsung, which produces smartphones, electronics, and memory chips, has reported billions of dollars in profits. This is Samsung Workers Union leader Son Woo-mak.
We're approaching the 5th year since the labor union was founded, but the management still refuses to recognize the union and continues to neglect it, ignoring the voices of the employees or the labor union without any communication.
New York Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul is facing growing criticism after she abruptly halted a plan to charge drivers $15 to enter parts of Manhattan. Up until this week, Hochul had advocated for congestion pricing as a way to raise money for public transit and to reduce car emissions in the city. Climate advocate Bill McKibben described Hochul's abandonment of the program as one of the most aggressive anti-environmental actions ever undertaken by a Democratic governor. In media news, the Washington-based news outlet The Hill has fired Brianna Joy Gray, the co-host of Rising, The Hill's daily morning show. Gray's been a vocal critic of Israel's war on Gaza. Last year, The Hill also fired the political commentator Katie Halper after she called Israel an apartheid state. And the Columbia Law Review website is back online after its board of directors took down the site Monday when student editors refused a request from the board to halt the publication of an academic legal article written by Palestinian human rights lawyer Rabia Akbaria, titled Toward Nakba as a Legal State. But the controversy has not ended. Student editors at the Law Review have voted to go on strike after the board added a disclaimer statement about the Nakba article on the review's website. Visit democracynow.org to see our interview with Rabia Akbaria. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Democracy Now! Is funded by viewers like you. Please give today at democracynow.org/give.
Thank you for watching and privilege of your time. This is Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Goodman. Have a good life.